Welcome to Life, Lessons, and Laughter with your host, Glenn Ambrose.
Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome. Here we go. Let's do a little life, a little lessons, and a little laughter. So today we're talking about some fun stuff. Tribulations while you're awakening. You know, there's I think it's it's becoming more common now, I would say. Which I think is just part of the spiritual path. The spiritual path, but I actually meant to say the spiritual awakening that's happening globally. You know, that I had multiple people tell me this past week that they're seeing it now. You know, like I've been talking about it for years, and people that I've talked to are, I know they grasped it and they understood what I was saying and they understood my examples, but now they're seeing it on their own. You know, it's just picking up speed and intensity, and and we see it on both sides. We see it with the problems, but we also see it with the solutions, and we see it with, like, I see it in what's becoming popular in a lot of ways. Like, I enjoy watching sports, so I watched some football this football season, American football, and on the backs of their helmets they have little sayings, and I think they had different sayings, like the player could pick whichever one they wanted, which started a couple of years ago, I think. And now I don't really pay attention anymore, but it catches my eye every once in a while, and most of them say choose love, which I think is cool. I remember I was watching a Super Bowl, oh my God, maybe 10 years ago or something, 12 years ago, I think, somewhere around there. And they had this big message in the stands. I think it was Super Bowl. It was some huge event like that. And it said, like, choose love in the stands and stuff. So this is stuff that I've seen, I've never seen it in my lifetime before. And it's just, you see both sides expanding. It's like the controversy and the problems and the fear and the, oh my God, the world's falling apart is expanding on one side, but the love and the peace and the people who are turning to love and working on themselves and making life changes for the better, for their own peace and contentment, and becoming healthier and happier, and all that's expanding. And people choosing a simpler life is getting more in fashion. I think just the minimalist mentality, just the fact that that's a movement, is testament to the spiritual shift that's happening. So this is all happening, but what's it look like for those of us on the spiritual path? And oftentimes it looks like intense suffering. It looks like some serious tribulations that we need to go through this awakening, which can be kind of off-putting because we're choosing love, right? We're the ones that are choosing love, trying to create this new paradigm, trying to be better versions of ourselves. We're doing good. We're doing the good thing. We're making the right choices. Why are we struggling? Why are we suffering? Why are we going through the difficulties? And that's what starts happening when we start leaning into the victim mentality. I'm doing all the right things. I mean, hell knows I've been there. I've been there plenty of times in the last 20 years. I've been on this path almost 21 years now. And I've gone through a lot during those years. And there's times where I've gotten to that place where I'm going like, seriously? Like, I mean, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the right things. I'm like, why am I experiencing this much tribulation? So we hit those pockets. We have pockets of joy and bliss and connection and synchronicity, and when everything's going smoothly too. Which, geez, do we resist that stuff? Do we complain when that's happening? No, of course we don't. Life is easy when things are going the way you want them to. So it's it's the times when we're going through these tribulations that I think we need to have a healthy outlook, so we don't fall onto the pity pot, or if we do, we don't stay there that long. So that's why I want to do this podcast, because I see more and more people going through it. And my take on it is it's kind of twofold, but they kind of overlap. So it could be one thing depending on how you're looking at it. But it's kind of like we're caught in between two worlds. We're caught in between the unconscious world that we've been conditioned to live in and function and think like and all this stuff. And we're going into the conscious world where we're living more presently and more aware. And, there's a stage of awareness, awakening that you have to go through. And, so you become aware. And quite honestly, I think that this is happening globally as we're becoming more aware. Everybody's freaking out about what's going on in politics and stuff, especially, and really it's nothing new. Like, this has been going on forever. Like, I mean, literally, like, this has been going on forever. This is nothing new. Structured societies have come into being for the last, I don't know, 100,000 years. And they're eventually, at some point, there are exceptions to this. Okay. Let's make that clear, especially in ancient civilizations and successful ones, and places that keep things simple. But those are rare, and they're out in the woods somewhere, hidden away from the rest of the world. So I'm talking about, as a general consensus, what's been happening for the last 100,000 years is societies come up, and there is a power structure, and that power structure funnels power upward. So eventually those are, what we commonly call pyramid schemes. So everything funnels upward, and the people at the top get used to it funneling upward, and that's just how things work, and it funnels upward. And then at some point, the people down at the bottom, which are the masses, get less and less and less, treated poorly and more poorly. They finally hit a point where they can't take it anymore, and then they rebel against it, and then society collapses. Now, what used to happen before is either a more powerful, a more physically dominant group would come in and wipe out your civilization, or the civilization would fall, just because of the pyramid scheme structure of it, whatever. And then you just go and you start with a new pyramid structure, and you go to another civilization and you create another one. And sometimes, we would just go to a different area, or we could find another continent or another area of, land on that continent or whatever, and we just start over. But now we're in a global society where everything's interconnected way too much, and so we kind of have like a global, I understand we still have continents and different countries and stuff, but the trade and the connection and we're so interconnected with one another that, like, if the United States or any other big powerful nation were to fall, which they will, it's going to affect everybody else on the planet. There will be residual effects, whereas back in history, that wasn't the case. If somebody on a different continent, their civilization fell apart, like the other continent didn't even know that they existed. So, so it didn't really affect them. Now we're globally connected, so it's affecting. So that, I think that this is what's transpiring, and the tribulations are getting more intense, and we're stuck between these two worlds. We're stuck between a world that's a paradigm that's collapsing and falling apart because it simply doesn't work for most of the people. So it's collapsing, and you've got all those people freaking out, and they're seeing it now. As I just explained, I think it's different from the past. It's different from the last 100,000 years because we're a global society. But what's actually happening is not different. It's been happening for the last 100,000 years, just on smaller scales. Right. So it's nothing new, yet the global impact of it is what's new, and how interconnected we are is new. But what's been transpiring isn't. But what's freaking everybody else is that we can see it. Like we're becoming aware. We've been in the information age for quite a while now. I don't even know if we're still considered that. I don't. They call things like, oh, we're in the information age. Now we're in the technological age. Now we're in the whatever. We still have a bunch of access to information. So we're seeing things happening all around the world, which increases our fear. I was mentioning this to somebody the other day. It happens on a large scale, but it also happens on a small scale. Like, when I was a kid, and even before that, if there were child abductions in the United States, you might have heard of one or two. Now you hear of all of them that happen everywhere around the world. Now, does that mean that they're happening more? No, it doesn't. Actually, if you look at the United States numbers, it actually happens much less. But people are more aware of it. So they hear about it more. So that it gives the implication, or it makes people feel like it's happening more. Therefore, it raises the fear. So everything's like this. We're more aware of it. So the fear comes up. Right. So this is, and this, so I'm kind of like, I'm going to try to bounce back and forth like I like to do, because I think it helps me make the point that this is happening on a small scale and a large scale. It's just what's happening in general on planet Earth. And you can see it in your own life, and you can see it in your own little community, and you can see it globally. It's all happening. Right. So like when we see this stuff in our own journey, in our own spiritual path, in our own awakening, in our own lives, we're like, oh my God, like I'm going to be present. Oh, okay. And then all of a sudden we catch ourselves drifting off, and we're like, how come I'm having such difficulty being present? It's like, yeah, well, the pace of your life is too fast. You're addicted to distractions, like your telephone, and the busyness of life is just insanity. How quickly we live, and we just accepted this as normal, and it's not. Our nervous systems are shot because we're constantly just doing one next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. And we're caught in between two worlds, so we're trying to implement this new way of being, yet we're moving too quickly to actually implement it effectively. And we're caught in between these two worlds. When I first woke up, like, I had blown open. So the first 2 years was just, wow. It was like, my whole world changed in 3 months. So it was like the next year and a half, 2 years was acclimating and figuring out how to interact with life in a completely new way. So I noticed things. And, one of those things that I think was a good example was becoming a parent. I was already a parent when I woke up. My son was about 2.5. So I'm a parent now. And I got to figure out what that means, how to do it. And I'm awake. Like, in some ways, I think I was more awake 20 years ago than I am today. I understand a hell of a lot more. But when you blow open like that, and everything's new, you're like a blank slate. So it's actually, to me, it's actually easier. It was easier just to live in God's grace all the time, because I was just so open. So what I needed to do was I needed to figure out, I was, I don't know if co-parenting is the right word. Maybe there's another word. If anybody knows if there's another word for this, let me know. I'm curious. But I don't want to say I co-parented, because that implies working together. I didn't work together with my ex-wife. We tried to very briefly in the beginning, and it was obvious that it was literally impossible. So we didn't. I raised my son the way that I wanted to raise him when he was with me, and she raised him the way she wanted to raise him when he was with her. And it was just very different, because there was no common ground there whatsoever. So, that's just how it needed to be. So, is there a word for that? Because I don't want to call it co-parenting, because we didn't parent together, but we were both parenting. So anyway, I wasn't in complete control, and I had in the beginning, I had no custodial rights whatsoever. She had full custody, full rights, everything. So I had to be very careful how I treaded, until I got more and more rights, and I eventually ended up with custody and everything. But for the first 10 years after I woke up, I needed to be, I had to keep going to court to get rights and be able to do things with them. But I had no custodial rights. So I had to be careful what I said at doctor's appointments and school appointments and all this stuff, because she could just cut me out if she so chose. So I had to figure out how to play both sides. My point is that I couldn't just raise my son spiritually. I mean, I wasn't in that situation, so I don't know what I would have done if I was, but there's a decent chance that I would have pulled him out of school when he was in first or second grade and homeschooled him or figured out something, because he just didn't belong in a structured school system, just like I didn't. And I understood that. But that's a good example. And there were multiple examples of, how do I get this kid to fit into a dysfunctional society and yet teach him what I believe are spiritual truths and the truths about life and how to interact with it and the importance of love and all this stuff. So I had to oscillate back and forth, and that's how I navigated it. That is kind of an example of where I feel we are now as a society, and those of us on the spiritual path. We're oscillating between both sides. And I don't know if we fully know we're doing it or to what extent we're doing it, but we are doing it, man. And it is causing a fair amount of suffering for us, because it's difficult, and I've been talking quite a bit in the last year about the middle ground disappearing. It's like we got to pick a side. It's because there's no, like, we can't, it's getting harder and harder to do that. It's getting harder and harder to work for a company that treats their employees like crap and still have self-worth. Right? Like 10 years ago, we could be like, oh, I'm going to a meditation on the weekend and I'll recenter myself. And I meditate every morning and I listen to uplifting podcasts on the way to work. And I do something spiritual after work for 10 minutes and recenter myself. And that was kind of enough, it seemed like, to keep us balanced and spiritually connected, but yet still function in this dysfunctional world. And that it's getting harder and harder to do that because we're creating a new paradigm, a new way of being based in love. We're like, we got to the, like, we're not going to fix the world. Like it's broken. It doesn't work. Like there's nothing to fix. You know, this is why it's like I can't take politics seriously because I don't think that there's a solution in there anywhere. Like, I don't care. Like, I understand that sometimes when you elect a particular person, some things can go in one direction that in some ways seem like they're getting worse. In some ways they seem like they're getting better, but the whole system is shot. Like this ain't going to work. Like we're not going to be living in a world similar to the way that the world has been for the last 100,000 years, or even, let's just simplify it, the last 500 years, the last 200 years. Like, you know, whatever your mind can grasp as far as what the world looks like and how societies are structured and stuff, like, we're not going to be like that 100 years from now. We ain't making it another 100 years. There's no place for us to run. We have too much powerful capabilities with like bombs and nukes and like, they're, over time that stuff gets more and more accessible. Like, we're not going to make it another 100 years like this. You know, not in my opinion. I mean, hey, I could be wrong, but like so it's like I can't, less and less I pay attention to that because, you know, it's got a strong pull and a strong draw and all this stuff, and I care about people, and I care about family members and loved ones and strangers. I care about people, so I don't want them suffering. So of course there's a part of me that looks at that stuff and goes, ooh. But I can't lean into it like there's a solution there, because I don't believe that there is. So the solution is the new paradigm that we're creating, which I think is going to look back to I think it's going to look similar to like ancient societies, where we have much smaller communities and we live amongst each other, you know, like-minded people, and we start kind of from scratch, for lack of a better term, going back to nature, things like this, simple lives. Like, we have to get back to that, because this is insanity the way we live now. Human beings weren't, our nervous systems, everything, we're not built for this. This is why we're in the situation we're in. So this is what's happening. Like, that is crumbling, and the new paradigm is being created. And if you haven't looked into it, look into it, man. It's like, it's already, there are places spotted throughout like every continent and most countries. Well, I shouldn't say most countries. There's a lot of countries out there. Many countries, and many big countries, there are intentional communities and small communities and nature-based. Like, they got all kinds of names, but they're out there already. And people are buying up land, and there's going to be more and all this stuff. So it's already happening. It's just that seems like such a pie in the sky, utopian or long off thing in the future to most people right now, and it ain't. I'm telling you, it is not. We are not as far off as you think. I don't know what's going to unfold. I mean, it could be over the next 5 years. It could be over the next 10 years. Oh, I don't know. I don't see us making 20. I'm thinking 5 or 10. But I think it's definitely going to happen in my lifetime. That just, it ain't going to work, And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if some countries are going to completely fall and it's going to look real ugly, or if people are just going to start moving out to these smaller places, and the people who choose to stay in that old paradigm will just stay in it, and it'll just continue being dysfunctional for another 20, 30 years. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like, but my point is that there is no middle ground. So we can't, what we've been doing is, like I said, living through spiritual principles, but interacting in a dysfunctional world that is anything but spiritual. And where we've been doing the balancing act, doing both, and we're just not going to be able to do that much longer. And that's why it's getting harder and harder. It's getting more and more difficult to play both sides, to be spiritual and keep your day job, because your day job is highly dysfunctional. Highly dysfunctional. Like you can't practice self-love and subject yourself to working 50, 60 hours a week for a company that is participating in the destruction of the earth and treating their employees like crap, and then run your kid to soccer practice and baseball practice and dance class and chorus and still get dinner on the table and and pay $5 a gallon for gas and buy a house that was worth 100,000 and buy it for 500,000. And like, it's just like, it's getting crazy, like you can't, I moved out when I was 18, man. I was making $5 an hour. And you know what I needed to do? I was working 40 hours a week, and I needed to pick up an extra shift that was like, I don't remember if it was once a week or twice a month or something. That was a Saturday. That was a half a shift instead of a full shift. It was like a 5-hour Saturday shift. But with my 45 hours, 40 hours plus 5 hours overtime at $5 an hour, I could have my own apartment. I could make a car payment, or did I have a car payment back then? I don't remember. But I could pay car insurance, have a vehicle to get me around, have electricity, telephone, cable, go out drinking every weekend. Okay, every night. And live. And I even budgeted my money where I could, I was probably saving like $10 a week or something. So like once a month, I would have like $40. And one time I went out and bought a vacuum cleaner, I remember. It's like, yeah. Another time I, saved up and I bought a fan. Ooh, it's hot in the summer. So I bought a fan. I don't think I had air conditioners. I don't know. So that's impossible now. It's like you can get a job making $20 an hour, and you can't have a car and insurance and food and have a 1-bedroom apartment at $20 an hour. I did it at $5 an hour. It's crazy. So it's just another example. I mean, we could sit here talking about these examples for all night. I mean, about how things are getting difficult in 30,000 different ways in a dysfunctional society, and how it's just not realistic to live in them anymore. It's just, we've lived in these societies our whole life. So the idea of building a little cabin and living simply off the land is like, what? You know? I mean, I'm blessed because I'm over here in the DR doing it. You know, I just kind of fell into this. But I'm not completely living off the land, but I could, you know, like if the whole world went to pot, like I could, you know, I've got neighbors that like me and trust me, and I'm part of the community. Like they would help teach me how to live off the land, because the people in this community that live around me can and do. So like, I'm in a good situation, but like we have to start, start learning stuff, man. If nothing else, start learning how to live off the land, start learning survival techniques, start learning. And it's not because I think necessarily we're going to drop into an age of like Mad Max or anything, although we could, but do it just because it's a healthier way of living. Like you can do this in the United States. You know, people have these houses for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 on a low level cost of a house, right? And they're like, oh, I wish, I see these posts all the time. Oh, I wish I could just live in a simple cabin by the woods. It's like, you can. You can. Like what most people are paying for their houses, that they could, you know, look into things, look into building a dome to live in, a cabin to live in. There's all kinds of options. Look into it. But this is all, you know, I guess I kind of went big picture there for a while, and I'll try to zoom back in to get into the more personal end of this. So, because those are the two areas that I wanted to cover in this podcast. Like that's like the global vision. Okay. That's the big picture vision. Now to zoom it in onto the microcosm instead of the macrocosm, it's like in our personal life, and I've, you know, touched on this a little bit already. We're not in the ignorance is bliss place anymore. Like we're aware. We've become aware. We're seeing more things happening. We're understanding things. Like, oh my, you know, the government was stealing from its people 100 years ago, 50 years ago. We didn't see it. We didn't understand it. And it was easy to look away. Now it's obvious. And it's like, oh my God, what's happening? It's like, it's always been happening. You just weren't aware of it. And it's the same thing in our personal lives. You know, as we become more aware in the beginning, it's like, oh my God, oh no. It's like, well, wait, like, it's okay. It's okay. It's actually a good thing, believe it or not. And I truly believe it is. Like, we're not, get used to disconnecting from what you know as the norm, because it's not normal. It's dysfunctional. It's the norm, but it's not normal. It's very out of character for humanity. We're not supposed to be living like this. So, you know, I was talking to somebody. It's like in one of those intentional communities, right? They have, you know, small groups of people living together, and they're living off the land, and they're self-sufficient, right? And they'll have people that are working, like, you know, depending on the system that they have set up, like 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And that's enough to keep everything clean, the food cooked, the food grown, the animals fed, the houses in repair, everything. Working, you know, now, so what's that? You know, 3 or 4, let's say 4 hours a day for 5 days a week. So that's 20 hours a week. Now people are working 40, 60 hours a week. For what? To post on Facebook that they wish they had a simpler life? Like, go get the simpler life. Like, you can actually do it. You can, and you might have to get creative because, let's face it, we are ushering in a new paradigm, but you can do it. So I digress. I want to get back into, that was a little bit microcosm, but I want to get even more microcosm with this. It's, it's just difficult, man, because we can't live, like I was saying in the beginning, we can't live in a dysfunctional world and grow spiritually. We can't choose to love ourselves and then work in an environment where we're abused on a daily basis and taken advantage of and pushed and treated disrespectfully and like, and I get a lot of the people who work out there. I'm not saying that we get treated disrespectfully, like somebody comes up and swears at us every day. Some people do work those jobs, but I just mean just the like people tell me all the time, like, oh yeah, I had a meeting after work and I had to tell them I was leaving and it was a big thing. Like, oh, it was me standing up for myself, because most people won't do that. Like, businesses having meetings that, whether people get paid for them or whether they don't get paid for them, isn't the point. When you're having meetings in off hours, that shouldn't be allowed, in my opinion. Like, we have lives. We don't work, like we work to live now, and or we live to work. That's the main thing. It's taking up 90% of our energy. And this is why we have no community. We have no closeness with our family. We're losing our social skills. We don't know how to interact with each other. We don't even know how to talk to each other anymore. It's just all attack and defend. We have no relationship skills because we don't interact with each other enough. Socially, we just don't. There's very little social life. Nobody knows their neighbor. We're all isolated. We're not meant to live like that. It goes against nature. Like, we have this innate desire to connect to others, to be accepted by and to connect with others. There's a reason for that. Like that it's instinctual. It's because that's how we're supposed to be living. And we've just isolated ourselves so much that everybody's on anxiety medication and antidepressants and people are like, oh, well, I have a hormone imbalance. Yeah, no kidding, you have a hormone imbalance because your hormones aren't being created because you're not living the life that you're supposed to live. You're living like a working robot with your nervous system shot to hell. And everybody, the rates of cancer are going through the roof, and everybody's developing all these sicknesses and diseases, and it's going through why? We're living wrong. This is messed up. Like, I think we have to start waking up to that reality more. Stress lowers your immune system. So when we're walking around living stressed out for 30 years and then we wonder why we got cancer, that's why. Because you have no immune system left. You're stressed out on a daily basis. And stress lowers your immune system. There's poison in all your food. The wheat that you used 75 years ago actually had nutritional value in it, whereas the wheat that you eat, and that's the foundation of many foods that are made today, has 75% more sugar and cholesterol in it than it did 75 years ago. Like, it's a different, they GMO'd it so much that it's a different plant. It's not even healthy anymore. Like, and everything's like that. The fluoride in the water, like everything. It's just we're being poisoned and driven. Like this is just not the way to live. And we can't do it anymore, peeps. We can't do it anymore. And I'm not telling you got to move tomorrow. What I'm saying is we have to start understanding that we're not going to be able to be living in the world the way it's created much longer. We just can't. Our bodies can't take it. Our minds can't take it. Our emotions can't take it. Our nervous system can't take it. And it's a pyramid scheme anyway, so it's folding. So like, if you got to go through some fear, then work through it. But we got to come out the other side and stop being realistic about to me, it's an act of self-love. It's like, I'm not going to live in that. I'm not. So I'm over here, but like, again, we just have to figure out, we got to start being creative. We got to start figuring out ways to grow our own food inside of our houses or in gardens. Maybe not all of your own food, but we have to learn how to, we have to look into building houses in unique ways. Because all this information is out there. It's already out there. Like, you'd be shocked. Like, you can come over here and buy a little piece of land and pay somebody to take care of it and build a little house. You could probably do that for 50 grand over here. In the US, who knows? You could probably do it for 100 grand there. And there's other things too. Start looking into off-grid communities and start seeing all the creative ways that they found to doing this type of stuff. But we need to do that as far as how we live. And I know it might seem overwhelming, but it's really not. It's way simpler than you realize. Now, to get to where you are completely off-grid and completely self-sufficient, you don't have to like make that leap. This is what keeps people stuck, is they're like, oh my God, I can't, I could never. I wouldn't even know where to begin. So they don't begin. It's like, no, it's all gray area. Like, living the way you're living, there's many ways to learn about stuff and start practicing different things that you can do to simplify your life as it is. And then when you're ready to take that next step, who knows? Some people, it might be retirement. Some people, once they look into this stuff and learn and find out that like how much less expensive it is to do than they think, because they're saving for retirement in the system that they've been exposed to. When you start understanding how much less it costs to retire in a different scenario where you just live a very simple life and where you can actually care for yourself very simply, like that, now all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I thought I was going to have to work until I was 70 or at least 67 or 65. Like, I could retire now, or I could retire in 5 years instead. Or, like, it's start the process where you are. Start learning, start looking into this stuff just in your spare time as a hobby. You'll be shocked. And you can do it with your health. There's different avenues. Like I was kind of talking about living, but start looking into caring for yourself naturally with natural medicines. The healthcare system is shot, man. Like, my son was sick for 6 weeks going to the medical system in the United States. And I fly over there and I'm like, what the heck is going on? I was going to fly over earlier, but he told me not to. So he thought he was feeling better. So then he wasn't. So I flew over and I'm like, and I look and I'm calling the doctors and I'm like, oh my God, like this is like the kid would die if it was up to this medical system, So I had him take some plant medicine, and he was literally doing backflips in 3 days. Fine ever since. And that was like 2 years ago. I'm telling you, man, like there's natural ways to care for yourself, and the information is out there now. So maybe that's one way. You start learning how to eat natural foods and look into natural plant medicines. Very rarely do I, like, if I have anything go on, do I take anything that is like man-made. Generally, I just go to the apothecary here, and just, which they have them in the States, and just go around and be like, okay, what do I get for this? Oh, these herbs, here's a bag. I'll put them all together for you. And then I got some tea bags that are empty. So I just pour it in and make myself a cup of that tea every night. or this or that. So we got to start changing the way that we're living. And I honestly, I thought that this podcast was going to be more about the emotional suffering. Maybe I'll do another one. But this is kind of where we are. We are faced with truth globally and about ourselves, and, there's a saying, like, if you're going through hell, just don't stop. Like, keep going. Like if you're going through hell, the worst thing you can do is just sit down and stop. Like, why would you do that? If you're going through hell, keep going so you come out the other side. Like eventually you're going to get through it. It's the, same with the dark night of the soul. I've been through that, and it's painful. I've been through a couple of them. But the last thing that you want to do is stop when you're in it. Keep going. Because eventually you're going to come out the other side, and oh my God, it's so glorious when you see that sunset or that sunrise. It's beautiful. So this is kind of where we are. I think a lot of us on the spiritual path. Oh, that was one thing I was going to touch on. Like a lot of us, you can phrase it in a lot of different ways, right? So a lot of us were kind of leaning into spirituality as much as we knew how to lean into. And we we started meditating, and we started going to the sound healings and the drum circles, and getting some crystals, and doing this and doing that, and listening to some teachers and learning more and more. And it's all, but a lot of it was self-knowledge, right? And self-knowledge doesn't do crap. We have to implement it into our daily lives. That's the big thing. Right. But we did it to the best of our ability. But we didn't fully change. We didn't fully awaken. We didn't fully become conscious. And that's what we have to do now. Okay. So you can look at it like people have been coming into this new age, or this new age of spirituality, this new wave of religion or spirituality, whatever you want to call it. And people came in many doors. People came in through suffering. People came in through addiction. People came in through yoga. Yoga is a spiritual tradition. It's not an exercise. It has components to it that can be used for exercise, but it's way bigger than that. But we Americanized it, and now it's like an exercise class. But people were exposed to Shavasana at the end, where they just lay down and center themselves. And it's the first time a lot of people felt stillness and the feeling of being centered and calm and peaceful. So that's an opening to the spiritual life. So many people came in through yoga. Many people came in through Reiki and like I said, different aspects of suffering. What people label as mental disorders, anxieties, depression. midlife crises, just this yearning for something more. Like people have been coming in, it's bubbling up within people, and it's people have been coming in for decades that way, since the 60s, and people have been, the interest in spiritual living has been expanding and growing more and more and more through all those ways. And that's cool and all, but there were just doorways to get us started. They weren't the solution. The solution is truly spiritual living. And yeah, you're going to have to let go of your egoic identity that you're so-and-so that does this work, and this is your, well, not that you have to change your name, but your name is who you are, and your job is who you are, and the role of father or mother is who you are. Like, we have to let go of that and start understanding and living like we are more, that we're more than that. And we have to start interacting with each other and the world as if we're more. And there's going to be a bunch of people that think we're weirdos and calling us weirdos. And we have to start accepting that and finding our like-minded people and socializing with them when we're not in work, and leaving our jobs. And we really need, not just leaving your job, replacing your job with something healthier, right? So you can still care for yourself. It's not about being irresponsible. It's the opposite. It's about totally being responsible for your life, because society ain't going to save you. Society is falling apart, and it's dysfunctional, and it's unhealthy. You have to save you. So you have to start taking this stuff seriously, taking your life in your own hands, that it's your responsibility, and really being spiritual. We need to do this, I mean, one of the ways that like going back to kind of ancient civilizations or less developed civilizations, like I live in the Dominican Republic. Do you know most people over here, that if you ask them how they are, ¿Cómo está? How are you? Most of them say something by the grace of God. Bien, gracias a Dios. Something to that effect, right? When you're leaving, a lot of times people will say, go with God. It's just like that. That's just how they speak here. Right. And there's a benefit to that. There's a benefit to understanding that there is a source of love that some people call God. Some people call it all kinds of other things that can support us and live, and we can live, like, it just wants us to live beautifully and happily and lovingly with each other, in community and simplicity. And we have to get back to that. We have to be more connected to our source so we can feel safe, so we can branch out and do these things. It can't be a hobby anymore, is my point. We've been treating it like a hobby, and it can't be a hobby anymore. And some people were treating it like a hobby because it was good enough and they chose not to go deeper. Some people were trying really hard and thought they were going deeper, but technically they were still kind of treating it like a hobby because they didn't know any better. Some people created a new identity out of being spiritual. They just traded in their old one. So, they're over in the spiritual community, and some of them are doing, I'm not making fun of any particular thing. I enjoy all this stuff, and I participate in it every once in a while. So I'm not saying any of this stuff is bad. Okay. But you have a lot of people that are, either teaching yoga or going to yoga classes all the time. And they're, going to drum circles, and they're playing with their crystal bowl, and they got their crystals at home, and they got their side hustle, doing Reiki or whatever other spiritual modality. And these people are wonderful people, and they're bringing like more love, and what they're doing as they are is good. It's really good. And it gives people a place to go and all that stuff. There's benefits to it. And it is love-based. And I do enjoy those people. And I enjoy, and some of them that do this are what I'm talking about. Some that do this are not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the people who created an identity out of it. It's how they pay their bills. Both sides, it's how they pay their bills, right? But some it's just, well, they used to be a stockbroker, now they're a yoga teacher. And they're just as identified with being a yoga teacher and speaking a certain way and wearing certain clothes as they were with being a stockbroker. Like there's no difference. Now, are they more love-based? Yes. I mean, they came into the door of spirituality. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not progress. I'm saying that you can't just stop there. If you're identified with it, it's not like there's another gear that you can find. Like you can go deeper into it. And this is where we are in the shift. And I'm not saying this in a critical way. I mean, I'm going to be honest and say that what I just described, those people that created a identity out of their spirituality and it's their life and leaned into it, I've done that to some degree. And I've really put a lot of effort into not doing that. And the way I teach spirituality is extremely deep. And most people, I shouldn't say most people, some people don't like the way that I teach just because the way I teach isn't for them, right? Some people don't like the way that I teach because it's too deep, it's too truth-based, and it triggers their fears and their insecurities, and they want nothing to do with me, right? So like I've done everything that I could or that I knew how to do to not make this an identity and to live very deeply spiritual. I have, but I haven't succeeded 100%. There is an aspect of my identity that's attached to being a life coach. It's part of the reason I rebranded now. There was a part of me that was so focused on being a present father and a good father for my son and trying to play both sides to get my son to be able to fit into a dysfunctional society, but yet still be spiritual. So I played both sides for 20 years, and that had residual effects on me. So I have to go deeper too. I'm not saying that I'm not putting down anybody out there. All I'm saying is that we all need to go deeper. Of course, there are some people who don't, that actually went deep enough. But the majority of us, we need to go deeper. We need to go deeper into our spirituality. We need to live it more. We need to talk it. We need to sound like those spiritual freaks that we never wanted to become. We have to start becoming like them. Because we're going to live this way or we're not going to live this way. I don't know. Hopefully that came across the way I meant it. Those spiritual freaks that we didn't want to sound like, there was a part of me that was like, well, I want my old friends to like me still. And, I don't want to be banging on a tambourine all the time. And I don't need to bang on a tambourine all the time, but I do need to be love all the time. I do, road rage isn't acceptable anymore. Not road rage where you go out and attack people. I mean, just feeling the road rage, just getting irritated driving. It's not acceptable. We got to up our game is my point. So I know that there's lots of suffering that we're on a spiritual path, but it's because we're in the middle. Push through, go deeper. Take your spirituality to another level because we're going through it right now and it ain't easy. So don't stop. Whatever you do, hit the gas, man. Go further. So that's going to do it. I got to wrap it up. So thanks for listening, everybody. And where's my closing? There it is. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Peace.